Well, welcome everybody. We're going to have a few members coming in here throughout our speech here today, and I welcome you for coming today to talk about an update about what's going on with Fast and Furious and the dialogue with the Department of Justice and Attorney General Eric Holder. The format today is going to be brief remarks by each of the members who've showed up today, and then we'll take questions and answers based upon our availability for time. First, for everybody, just do a short summary of what Fast and Furious was. This was actually a program run by our government through the Department of Justice through alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, in which we allowed over thousands of weapons to be placed in the hands of dangerous illegal drug cartel members by allowing them not utilizing and violating proper law enforcement protocols. Several of these weapons were found at the murder of Border Agent Brian Terry, and many more have been linked to hundreds of deaths of Mexican citizens. OGR and Congress have asked for oversight to be able to find out exactly who authorized this, how they involved it, and who is responsible for this. And we've seen a constant stonewalling in regards to getting information and access to the proper folks that were involved. Today that continued with the Judiciary Committee, and it only brought my resolve by the poor performance of Attorney General Eric Holder today to ask not only for contempt charges to be moved forward fast, but also to move our resolution of no confidence. And I hope the American people see the same resolve that I have and many of my members behind me, that we've lost confidence in the Department of Justice, in particular its Chief Law Enforcement Officer, Eric Holder. We currently have 114 members who have signed on as co-sponsors, and we would like to see that move forward in the next month. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague and friend, Mr. Steve Pierce from New Mexico.
Thank you very much, and would like to thank the gentleman from Arizona for bringing this press conference together, but also for pushing the concept that people who work for the government should be accountable. Mr. Holder has been stonewalling for the entire time that we've been asking him about this issue. For myself, I was reelected in 2010. In January of that year, we took a congressional delegation to the southern border. It was there that we learned of the fact that guns that were sent south of the border in Fast and Furious were used to kill an agent of the United States government. We came back and began to ask those questions. Mr. Holder has been submitting partial documents. He's been claiming that he did not know of these events, and yet an email that was just released shows that even as early as October 17th of 2010, his agency, his deputy undersecretary, is referring to Fast and Furious by name. They knew about it, and yet they're lying to the American people, and they're lying to Congress. The American people are losing confidence in our government because they see government officials who have no legal bounds. They see things like this. They see our U.S. soldiers brought up on trial charges for things they may have done, but the people at the top are able to escape. As Chairman Issa wrote in a June 5th letter to Holder, even a perfunctory review of the wiretap applications amply demonstrates the immense detail documenting gun-walking tactics. Mr. Holder today said that the communications in this didn't even refer to Fast and Furious, and yet the words are clearly here in the email traffic from inside his offices. So again, we have the chief law enforcement officer of the land not being truthful as he talks to the American people and as he talks to Congress. Again, we strongly support Mr. Gosar's resolution. We strongly support his suggestion that we should push the contempt charges and should move forward with this investigation of our Justice Department, America's Justice Department. Mr. Holder said they've apologized. I'm sorry, but an apology does not rectify when you've broken the law. Never. It's time for Mr. Holder to be accountable. I would yield back and thank the gentleman for allowing me to speak today.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Banashek from Michigan's 1st District. It's been 18 months since Michigan native Brian Terry was killed on our southern border. You know, I'm in a border district as well. We have border agents in my district. The American people deserve to know the truth behind the administration's Fast and Furious scandal. The Attorney General is supposed to be the highest law enforcement official in the land. With the Attorney General, Mr. Holder, we have to ask, whose side are you on? During the investigation into Fast and Furious, we've learned that the government was supplying guns to foreign criminals under Mr. Holder's watch. This is deeply troubling and leaves us asking lots of questions. Why was this allowed to happen? What was the goal of the program? What was Mr. Holder's involvement? Who all was involved in making these decisions? I recently wrote to Mr. Issa supporting a resolution to hold Mr. Holder in contempt of Congress for his failure to adequately respond to these kind of questions. This is all about being able to trust our government. The American people need to be able to trust their law enforcement officials. You know, I don't think that trust can be returned until we get a full answer to all these questions. Since the news first broke about the scandal, I've been hearing from citizens throughout my district. People in northern Michigan and across America need to know that Mr. Holder is on their side, on the side of law and order, no matter who you are. I plan to continue to monitor the situation carefully and work with my colleagues and House leadership and Mr. Issa to hold the Attorney General and the rest of the Justice Department accountable for what they've been doing. I'd like to introduce Kiko Canseco from the 23rd District of Texas. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan, and I want to thank also my colleague from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, for arranging this press conference and also for leading this effort on the Fast and Furious issue. Let me tell you, my name is Francisco Kiko Canseco, and I represent the 23rd District of Texas. It's a large district, and we have almost 800 miles of U.S.-Mexico border. And to put it in perspective, we have from Brownsville, Texas, all the way to San Diego, we have 1,900 miles of U.S.-Mexico border, and I represent nearly 800. Along that border, we have a huge amount of American population that lives in fear over crossover violence that is occurring, fear that it will occur, and something needs to happen. And those are the issues that I deal with my constituents on a daily basis. Operation Fast and Furious was a misguided and a failed operation which endangered not only our law enforcement officers on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border, but also American citizens and Mexican citizens as well. Guns from operation have been found at crime scenes on both sides of the border and have been attributed to the deaths of at least one federal United States law enforcement officer. And according to ATF, the objective of the gun-walking probes was to deny the Mexican cartels the tools of the trade. So the reality of the gun-walking operation was nearly the opposite of its objective, as we all know. This disastrous Department of Justice program directly aided and abetted the Mexican cartels as the cartels derive their power through violence and profits from illegal activities, including death. Their enforcement techniques and brutal intimidation practices are made possible through the use of weapons, many of which they acquire because Attorney General Eric Holder and his department and their negligence and the lack of the most basic of oversight procedures totally failed. The fact that the Department of Justice would allow the practice of gun walking to occur in such a reckless and irresponsible manner in a way that cost innocent civilian lives is incomprehensible and borders on criminal negligence. As many of our brave law enforcement officers risk their lives to ensure that our nation's borders are secure and that drugs and violence do not spill over into the United States of America, this blotched operation has empowered the Mexican drug cartels and has set back our efforts to secure our shared border with Mexico. And as the House of Representatives has continued to investigate the pernicious, fast and furious operation, the Department of Justice and Attorney General Eric Holder have been unhelpful and totally uncooperative. Attorney General Eric Holder has time and time again withheld information from the House investigation, failing to fully comply with many committee requests and subpoenas for documents that could help us get to the bottom of this matter and ensure that no more innocent lives are lost. And I personally believe that Attorney General Eric Holder has misled the Congress of the United States in his testimony and impeded our investigation into Operation Fast and Furious. And it is my opinion that Mr. Holder is unfit to serve in the position of the United States Attorney General's office, our nation's highest law enforcement office. So today, Attorney General Holder once again testified before the Congress. And as my colleagues continue to investigate this very serious matter, Attorney General Holder continues to be unaccountable and less than forthcoming, refusing to even accurately detail his knowledge and involvement in the approval and oversight of the operation. I'm increasingly convinced that we need to seriously change the Department of Justice's leadership. Thank you, and now my colleague from Texas, Mr. Louis Gohmert.
Well, thank you. And Paul, thank you for setting this up. This is a very serious issue. When you have the top United States official, when it comes to justice, causing injustice, it's time for a change. It's been time for a change for quite some time. And as Attorney General Holder testified today before our committee, I was appalled. He said there are political aspects to his office. He is the top justice official in America. He's supposed to be the one level head that doesn't get involved in politics. He's involved in justice. And as a very wise judge told me after I finished law school and was a prosecutor, he said, never forget, your job is justice. It's not winning a case. It's not getting a conviction. It's doing justice. And this man has lost complete sight of that. Now, I realize before he was Attorney General, he was in the business, at least at times, of getting people pardons. Well, if you're in the business of trying to get pardons for criminal conduct, then you don't want paper trails. You don't want anybody to find anything that leads to your client, that kind of thing. He's the top justice official in America. And for a man in charge of the Justice Department not to be able to call in his top people and say if he really didn't know, and I don't think we can trust what he's saying anymore, but to call them in and say, who authorized this? He can't do that. One of two reasons. He knows who authorized it, and he may have known at the time, or he really didn't know, and he is such a poor leader that he can't not manage the Justice Department efficiently. If we're going to have justice in this country, you got to have the top justice official able to carry out justice within his own office. So we know May of last year, I believe it was May or June of last year, when he testified before our committee, and when he was asked, I wanted to know, when did you first learn? Oh, a few weeks ago. When he came before our committee again some months ago, he was asked, hey, now we find out that you actually knew months before the hearing you testified, you only found out a few weeks before. And basically he was saying, well, a few weeks, few months, what's the real difference? The top justice official doesn't know the difference between months and weeks. It became very clear that this is a man who has a credibility problem. He has a leadership problem, and it's time for a change. He believes his job involves politics. Well, I'm telling you, when I saw under the Bush administration we had a problem and we needed a different head of the Justice Department, I called the White House and said it's time for a change. I wish that some of my colleagues on the other side would be as bipartisan and as objective as I was during the Bush administration, because the problem now is far worse than ever occurred under Bush's Justice Department. So I hope that others will step up. I appreciate having a number of freshmen, other members. Of course, we know Darrell Issa is out leading the charge. He was asking some good questions today. But people have been killed, and as I asked Attorney General Holder, you have someone in your office, maybe more, authorized guns to be sold to international criminals, and you can't find out who did it? That alone is enough reason for a new Attorney General. And I hope and pray for America's good we will get that. Thank you. At this time, calling my friend Cynthia Lummis.
Well, thank you. I'm Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming. And like Attorney General Holder, I put up my hand and swore to support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And we're in a position now, having inquired repeatedly and sought documents repeatedly from the Justice Department to see if the Attorney General has indeed obeyed and defended the Constitution of the United States, required the same as the chief law enforcement officer of this nation, of his employees, where we have our doubts. Some people in the other party say, why don't you just wait until after the election? Let's not make this political. Well, it's not political when we've been discussing this for 18 months, when we've been asking repeatedly for information that would either support and rectify and justify the actions of Mr. Holder and his employees, or would explain how something like this could go so terribly wrong. And we're not getting those answers. This is not political. This is the House of Representatives performing its function of overseeing the executive branch and their commitment to obey and defend the Constitution. We have a constitutional duty to provide that check and balance. It is Mr. Holder who has bounced that check. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Micah.
Well, thank you. I'm John Micah from Florida, and I guess everybody else, I came in a little late, has spoken. I want to thank Paul for leadership in calling folks together and also calling to the attention of the American people the failure of this administration, particularly the Attorney General. Congressman Gomer, I heard him summarize it, and he's a judicial official from Texas, that this is the chief judicial enforcement officer of the United States. So it's incumbent upon an individual in that position to not only uphold, but also to enforce and prosecute the law on behalf of the citizens, people of our country, and our government. And I've been disappointed since the attorney took office, both in his use of that office in a political manner. It's not a Department of Justice. It's been a Department of Injustice in its pursuit and prosecution of selected cases, some with, unfortunately, a political binge and tweak, and to go after folks they shouldn't go after, than to ignore other violators. My role in all of this is, let me just for a minute for my colleagues, some of the newer ones. I chaired criminal justice and drug policy for 2 years, from 98 to to 2000. In that work, we tried, working with Denny Hastert, who chaired that responsibility before me, we tried to take some of the drug trafficking and slaughter that was taking place, and particularly in Colombia, get a handle on it. We passed Plan Colombia, and it was basically a zero tolerance. It was a tough enforcement. The Clinton administration ignored it. The Bush administration came in and actually implemented it. We went from a slaughter of tens of thousands of officials to eventually bringing that country, which experienced an unbelievable slaughter, under control. And we did that through some tough enforcement from some directed resources and assistance of the United States, and also by taking out the bad guys and working with the Colombian leadership to do that. In that process, I stopped on my way one time meeting in Colombia, and we assembled the leaders of Mexico, and I gave a speech behind closed doors. And we predicted that a lot of the drugs that were coming through Mexico at that time, and the violence wasn't as intense, would fall off the truck. And what we were told by our intelligence personnel officers and others that the narcotics would end up there. And what we found there was corruption from the street level to the president's office. And we warned them that they would be losing their country. And if you haven't seen the facts, if you haven't seen the gruesome details, the decapitation, the mutilation of bodies, the violence, we're in the tens of thousands. The country of Mexico has lost its way. Comes along in March 2009, we did a hearing, and I pleaded with the Obama administration. My quote was to slaughterhouse in to stop the slaughterhouse in the south of the border and help Mexico retain control of their country. And then I pointed out also, folks, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Some of you weren't here. When the Democrats had control of this place for 4 years, they did not do a single hearing on these issues. They let this spin out of control. Little attention, no effort was paid. And the United States, in partnership with the last majority, allowed, again, to Mexico spin out of control. I called on that to enlist back again in March 2009. In 2010, we requested, because this administration came in, instead of doing anything, they had a very specific agenda, and that was to go after and promote gun control. You need to go back and look at the clips. They were interested in one thing, gun control, and they said American guns that are being smuggled illegally into Mexico are the problems. If that was the case, probably in some of the states in the Midwest, if it was the number of guns and armaments, they would be centers of violence, and yet they're centers of peace. But that was their thinking. So they concocted this scheme that backfired. It backfired in that it broke federal law. It backfired in that an agent was killed. It backfired in that the drug smuggling was continued. It backfired in that the weapons that we were saying were illegal, causing the problem, we were supplying. It's an incredible scenario. And they have backed and walked away from this. I called in October 27th, 2011, with 8 others for Eric Holder's resignation. I'm back here on June 7th to say again, he needs to unequivocally step down. Not only has he used the office in an improper manner as a chief prosecutor, and I described his abuses there, but when you have a case of this magnitude, and again, and the damage that it has done, not only has it done damage to the credibility of that office and his continued presence in that office, he has also done great damage to doing something about the slaughter of people and trying to transfer the blame to other, again, imaginary reasons and sources. So I'm as intent as ever as saying that he needs to step down. He needs to come clean with the committee and the Congress. This is a very sad chapter for a Department of Justice that we depend on for justice. Yield back the balance on my time.
I just want to highlight a couple of the boards that we got up here. First of all, I think today, to kind of summarize it, Congressman Gowdy talked about justice. Justice is blind and justice has a sword, and yet we see Fortress Holder here. He told about the facts. Well, the facts is that there's over 80,000 pieces of paper that are out there, that we've only seen 6,700. Most are severely redacted and duplicative. We've seen very few of the witnesses, which we've asked for too, as well. So these are some of the statements that are here that will give you some visuals about what we're being impeded with. It's true. We are tired of seeing misinformation, misdirection, lies, and not seeing bureaucrats being held to the same accountability as the rest of America. And America deserves better. Not only that, but the family of Agent Brian Terry needs to have some rectification, as well as, I constantly say it, where is the Hispanic caucus in regards to the loss of life in Mexico? Hundreds of people have lost their lives to these guns. I'm also from Arizona. The southwest border is going to be impugned over and over again by the guns that they failed to interdict by proper protocols by law enforcement. These are some of the facts. You can't dispel the facts, but when you come clean, they will set you free. So with that, I'd be happy to take some questions.